See, the Sutton always tries to stop Torah from spreading. That's why the internet has so much potential, but also so much danger. So we are in Bitachon Blast number 3, choosing blessing over curse, and I have some really good stories for you, and I also have a really cool video at the end. If you could stay for that, I'm really really happy that I got hold of this. It's a video of Rav Asher from 2007, and it really made my week. All right, so let's start with Wings of Faith. So we're trying to find bitachon in this very difficult time. So when someone forsakes Hashem, he has done two things wrong. One is his turning away from Hashem, period. But the other one is not just that he turned away from Hashem, it's that he turned instead to Be'eros Nishbarim, worthless sources. That's based on a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. When the Jews served the golden calf, says Rabbeinu Bachya, their sin was by Amiru es Kavodim. They exchanged their glory for a worthless grass-eating ox. And so it's not just that, oh, you turned away from Hashem. It's that Hashem is the only one that provides, but you've turned to something that can't provide anything. And so Rav Asher always explained that this great story for what Be'eros Nishbarim, what worthless sources are, where people turn towards them. So he said like this: someone from a primitive village once saved the life of the mayor of a large city. The mayor told him, as a reward, I want you to come to the big city, and I will give you anything you ask for. At the mayor's house, the man saw a fascinating thing. It was a faucet that could be turned on, and running water came out. This wasn't around in his area at all. He looked at it with wide eyes and fascination. The mayor asked him if he had decided what he wanted. He replied, yes, I want that faucet. Surprised, the mayor asked him what he would do with it. He replied, that's what I requested. Can I please just have it? The mayor took it off of his own sink and presented it to the villager. Meanwhile, the villager went back to his town and invited everyone to come see his magical faucet that would provide the entire city with greatly needed water. People gathered in the village square to watch him turn the knob, but to his great dismay, no water came out. First, he was embarrassed, and then he grew angry. The mayor lied to me. He ran back to the mayor, accusing him of cheating him. The mayor calmly explained that the faucet only works if it's connected to a source of water. So many people think that turning to other sources than Hashem will help them. They are turning faucets that are empty and unable to provide anything, as they are not connected to the source. And that's really what it is. When we turn towards the wrong things, then Hashem says you're turning towards something that can't give you any pleasure. There's a I'll talk a lot about Navardic tonight. That was Rav Asher was a Talmud of Rav Ram. Rav Asher was a Talmud from Rav Ram Yafin, who was the son-in-law of the Alter Navardic. So the Alter Navardic was he was a Talmud of a Rishon Salanter, and he was very blunt. So one of the things he told his Talmidim was that when a person gives into the Yetzer Hara, when he gives into his desires, so he's like a dog that's chewing on a bone and trying to get the marrow out, and the dog is just struggling and struggling, and finally, after minutes or a long time of struggle, he bites his tongue and he bleeds, and then he says to himself, oh, at least I got something. So that's when we turn towards Be'eros Ishbar, when we turn towards empty sources, we get nothing, but we just convince ourselves that we're getting something. But he's only tasting the blood of his own tongue. So that's a little graphic, but the point is that the bitachon is we turn to Hashem, but it's also that we recognize that we're not being distracted by other things that can't really give us anything. It says bitachon begets results, as it says, Baruch HaGever Asher Yitach BaHashem V'haya Hashem Yivtacho. Praise is the man who relies on Hashem, and as Hashem as the one who delivers faithfully to him. So Rav Asher goes into that a little bit more. I'm going to skip that part for now because I want to pick certain selected parts. It's a curse for people who rely on sources other than Hashem. That's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. So Hashem, Rav Asher explained, Hashem doesn't take it personally, kaviyachol, when we do normal human sins of the flesh, but he does take it personally, so to speak, when we rely on other sources, because who knows lechem l'chol basar? He's the one that gives sustenance to all. So why would you turn towards something that can't provide you when you have Hashem who can provide? Many of us think that bitachon is a positive aspect that we can add to our lives. It's an enhancement. If we choose to live without bitachon, then perhaps it's just neutral. Chovos HaLevavos quotes the verse, Or HaGever. No, you have to understand that if you don't have bitachon in your life, curse is one who's not trusting Hashem. This is teaching us otherwise. Bitachon is a requirement. Bitachon brings blessing. Let's say there's an avrich who's struggling on a very small salary, and he's not making ends meet. He gets a job and he has some money in the bank. Human nature causes him to think that the job is supporting him and to forget that it comes from Hashem. When we find blessings in our life, we have to recognize that Hashem is one that gives it to us. And this story that I'm about to read was actually edited by the Rebbitzin. There's two versions. There's a Rusher's version and the Rebbitzins version, and I'll try to make a connection between the two. It was actually one of the few things that she edited in the Sefer when I put it out. And I'll tell you why she edited it. So this is Rav Asher's version. When I got married, we had the tiniest possible income. I wanted to be connected with Adam Gudel, Avram Yafin Zatzal, who was a son-in-law of the Alter Navardik, a Gudel in Torah and Musar, but there was no available slots in his kollel. I told him that I very much wanted to join the kollel, and he was able to find a way to give me less than half the regular kollel salary, which in itself wouldn't have been enough to support even the full salary. I grew a lot in learning there, but we had no money. For lunch every day, and this is the line here that many of us heard from Rav Asher's own ears, for lunch every day, my wife and I would sit down and learn Chovos Halvavos, Shahar Bitachon. That was our lunch because we had no bread for that meal. When we finished Shar Bitachon, we learned Madregas Adam, which is the Alter Navardik Sefer, the chapter called Darche Bitachon by the Alter Navardik, and I'll mention that at the end. When we finished that, both my wife and I got jobs, and we had enough money to live on. I got my first teaching job in Eretz Yisrael, says Rav Asher. My wife was given an administrative assistant job where we went from poverty to having income. In fact, Hashem was so generous to us that we were able to start a gemach, free loan program as well. Rav Asher lent money to lots of people and often didn't get money back. Can I say that I wasn't guilty of thinking that my job gave me the money? It certainly was a big nisayon, but we learned to attribute our blessings and sustenance to Hashem. As we learn more and have gone through life, we have come to a deeper understanding and appreciation of what bitachon is. So in this version of a story, I took out something very strong. Rav Asher had said that we had no food for lunch. The Rebbetzin said that if she recalls correctly, they did have a little bit of food. And so my understanding is that what Rav Asher meant to say was that things were very tight, and this was his lunch. And he himself said about his wife that her bitachon really carried him through. And he said that her lunch when they learned Shar Bitachon was so delicious that he would sometimes ask for doubles. So that was his version of the story that many of us heard him say was that there was no food at all. The Rebbetzin said that she doesn't want me to print that because she felt there was a little bit to eat. But nonetheless, they certainly built their family based on bitachon. And finally, a story that Rav Asher used to quote many, many times. He was very close with Rav Yozel Tzeinvert Zatzal, who was basically the Rosh Shiva of Stalin Karlin. He was a very fascinating person. One time I had this chus of eating a Shabbos meal at his house, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. But he once told over a young man that was getting married. So he heard this conversation. The friend asked him, "How are you going to support your wife and future family?" So the chassan said, "Don't worry, Hashem's the provider of all. He's unlimited in his abilities. He'll take care of us." Then the chassan finished off his response with a little mumble that contradicted everything he just said. If worst comes to worst, I have a rich uncle. So Rav Yozel Tzeinvert used to tell everyone, is that what bitachon's all about? It's about the rich uncle. Bitachon is full and total reliance on Hashem. So I want to mention a couple of things, and then I want to leave you off with a video of Rav Asher, which I found very, very fascinating and very timely as well. So in Madregas Adam, which was the posthumously printed sefer of the Alter Navardik, because he used to write. He died in 1920, and he would send out little stacks of ma'amorim and thoughts for his talmidim, and it was put out after he died. He wanted them to put it out and call it Madregas Adam. He actually named the sefer, and it's actually on his kever, which he was originally buried in Europe, and then his body was brought to Eretz Yisrael, which is a whole story in itself, a fascinating story, but not for now. But nonetheless, he actually called the sefer Madregas Adam, even though it was never put out in his lifetime. So he asks a very fascinating kasha. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem, Lo uchal anochi levadi lases. I can't carry this people. Now, the Alter Navardik's entire life story and entire goal of literally everything he did was to build Torah. And all he wanted to do was just build more Torah. And his last chapter is called Mezakeh Arabim. It means to help other people. It's a phenomenal sefer. Rav Asher said everyone should learn it. It's an amazing sefer. It's an amazing chapter if you want to be inspired about helping other people. And it's kind of the precursor for Kiruv before it was even invented. So basically, he asks this kasha that Moshe says to Hashem, I can't carry everyone together. I can't do this alone. So Hashem says to him, and I'll mistranslate at first what we think he says. Hashem says, don't worry, I'm going to appoint 70 elders. They'll help you out. But says the Alter, no, it's not what the pasuk says. Pasuk says, Esfali Shivamish, get 70 people, ... and I will give them some of your spirit. Now, that doesn't make sense, because Moshe said, I can't carry them. So you giving them my spirit doesn't accomplish anything. So the point is that I can't do it. That's why I'm asking for them. It should be that they should also have their own power. So you could answer that Hashem was saying that they'll have the same power that's invested in you, but that's not what the pasuk is saying. The Itzalti min haruach means I'll take your power that you have and I'll give it to them. So it says the Alter Navardik, it's because Hashem gives each one of us unlimited power. And Hashem was telling him, you're wrong, Moshe. You could do it yourself. And he was actually, according to some midrashim, he was actually punished for saying this. And Hashem said to him, you know what? You can't handle it. I'm going to take all that power that you could have had, and I'll give it to other people, and I'll let them do it. Now, of course, Moshe was a great tzaddik, and he was Moshe Rabbeinu, and his zechus is all of, he's the one that gets a merit in all of our learning. But says the Alter Navardik, the lesson here is that what people see, people that help other people, adrabah, bezesh makabel love, call Christ, when you accept the responsibility to do something great, zegufa garim shia nakal etzlo, that makes it easier and available for you. Kianasina hiya kabbalah, because your generosity is what gives you that power, and that's what Hashem was telling. And says the Alter Navardik, that's what the pshat is in the Medrash that says, B'shvil she'amar echa esalavadi, because you, Moshe, as a Medrash in echa, because you said, how can I carry them? So Nanshu, you're punished. V'amru echa yashva bada, that's where you got punished. So all destruction comes when you don't realize the greatness of who you are. That's what the Alter Navardik taught us, and that's what Bitachon is also, to recognize how great you are. I want to share with you one story, and then another story, and then a video. So just stick with me. So one small spark, again, Rabbi Yechiel Spiro. So it's like this. Rav Ezra Barzan was a Yerushalmi Yid, and he was suffering tremendously towards the end of his life. He had lots of debilitation. One day, Rav Reuven Karellenstein went to go visit him. He sat down next to Rav Ezra, who lay in his bed, and along with Rav Ezra's son, he tried to begin a conversation. However, it quickly became evident that Rav Ezra Barzan was incapable of conducting a discussion. Most of his body functions had already stopped working. It was days before he was going to pass away. Among them, his ability to speak clearly was gone. This was aside for the other crippling challenges and awful pain that racked his body. Rav Reuven tried his utmost to decipher what Rav Ezra was saying. He saw that Rav Ezra was trying to say something. Seeing that it pained Rav Reuven, that he couldn't understand him, Rav Ezra took a sitter that was right next to him and mustered up the strength to open it to the words of Hal. Turning to the paragraph of Lo Lanu, a very famous chapter, he began to point to the words. Now that there was a visual aid, Rav Reuven started reading the words and was trying to get the message. So first Rav Ezra pointed, Atzaveim kesev v'zav, Maaseh de Adam. The Avodah Zarah are just made by people. Pelahem v'lei daber. They have a mouth and they can't speak. Look how worthless the Avodah Zarah, the idols are. And then Rav Ezra pointed to himself to show, I'm also, look, am I not also worthless? I also can't speak. They have a mouth, but they cannot speak. Then he kept pointing to the sitter. Aznayim le'em v'lo yishmo. They have ears and they can't hear. And Rav Ezra pointed to himself again and was asking, look, I'm also like the Avodah Zarah. I also am worthless. Rav Ezra went through all the psukim and kept pointing to himself. He can't move, can't walk, can't do anything. And Rav Reuven was getting nervous. What's his Rebbe trying to tell him? Is he depressed? What's he saying? And then suddenly Rav Ezra showed him the last words that answered everything that he was trying to say. I'm totally different. What does that mean? Because he said, Yisrael b'tach b'Hashem. That Kapitel Tehillim ends. Why am I different? Because I rely on Hashem. Sure, the Avodah Zarah, those are be'eros and shparim. They're worthless. They give us nothing. That's how our entire religion was founded. That's how Abraham came to be, because he saw that the Avodah Zarah brings nothing. And so that the difference is Yisrael b'tach b'Hashem. That makes all the difference. None of our mouths could talk. None of our ears could hear. None of our limbs could move. It's only Hashem that gives us that ability. And so that's a shot. Yisrael b'tach b'Hashem. It's the bitachon that we invest our lives in. The alternate, the clip that I'm going to show you has two very fascinating parts to it. The first part is the idea that this clip was taken in 2007. Rav Asher had just spoke at a bris. He spoke at a bris of a good friend of mine named Hirsch Hiller, who was living in Eretz Yisrael at the time. Him and his wife did. And they were finally blessed with a son, their first child. And it was a very big simcha. I wasn't there. I was in America at the time. And Rav Asher would always speak about his Rabbeim, and he would go to every Talmud's bris or simcha, and he would always speak about his Rabbeim. And he would always talk about the Panovich Rav, how the Panovich Rav was a blind Torah. He was someone that built Torah. Everything he did was for the sake of building Torah. And so the context of this bris is very fascinating, because my friend Hirsch made a bar mitzvah on Thursday, this past Thursday, in quarantine and in a stay-at-home order in Wisconsin. And he made a beautiful video of inspiring his son. And the video ended with this beautiful clip of Rav Asher. And Rav Asher said at that time he had a cold and he wasn't feeling well. And he's talking about how he doesn't want to get anyone sick because he has germs that he is afraid of spreading. But he makes a very, very poignant point about important germs that we should be spreading. And it really hit home to me that, it's very interesting that 13 years later, this message is just so relevant to us. He literally, Rav Asher would would have been proud to be able to speak at this Talmud's son's bar mitzvah. But this message is just so powerful because the contrast of the germs that are around us that we don't want to catch versus the healthy germs, the Az Nibru Yura Hashem Vayakshem Hashem Vayishma is just really powerful. So before I show the clip, I just want to zoom out and talk to you about what he said beforehand, because I'm only showing the last 40 seconds of his speech, which is classic Rav Usher, and then we'll call it a night. So he was talking about his Rebbe, the Panovich Rav. Panovich Rav escaped the Holocaust very narrowly because he was the chief rabbi of Panovich, and he was a big fundraiser. He was a brilliant fundraiser, and he happened to be in London when the war broke out, and he wasn't able to get back. And unfortunately, his wife and his 11 children were all murdered by the Nazis. He had one son, I believe one son that did escape, but that was it. His entire the Nazis destroyed. He had Ksavim on Kol Torah Kula, Shas, Babli, Yerushalmi written. The Nazis destroyed it all. So the Panovich Rav, but even in Europe, he was a builder. He was a Talmud of Navardik as well. He was a Talmud of the Chavetz Chaim as well. But he was also a Talmud of Navardik, and people said about him that he was pure Navardik. So in Panovich, he built so many yeshivas and orphanages. He took care of people. The joke in Panovich was that you should never ever pave a road that's being destroyed, that's falling apart, because Rabbi Kahanim, the chief rabbi, is going to build a building there, and it's going to mess up all the road anyway. You're going to have to redo it. But it wasn't a joke. That's literally what it was. And when he stood up in Bnei Brak in the mid 40s, right after the war, and he said, "I'm going to build the biggest yeshiva. I'm going to rebuild Torah here in Eretz Yisrael," people thought he was out of his mind. They thought he lost it. But yet he built and he built and he built, and his yeshiva was where Rav Usher learned. But more than that, it created literally Gedolei Yisrael. So Rav Usher's point here is that he always mentioned his Rabbeim and how important they were and how much they built Torah. But he talks about the spark that could inspire. So I'm going to show you this video, and then I'm going to wish you a good night. All right, you should be able to see that and hear it.
They are now, each one of them, on its own, it's hundreds of people. The power of Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit is Yiddishkeit can be a contagious thing. I'm a little sick now, I'm trying to get away. I don't want to make anybody catch what I have. But I do like people to catch any Yiddishkeit I have. Because Mida Toiva Meruba, if there's such a thing as germs being contagious, Mida Toiva Meruba, the fire of Torah is a contagious thing. And it can turn on other people. And then it can continue going and going and can have whole conflagration. One match can take a whole forest fire.
That's Rav Usher. He was a match and he made a forest fire. So as we sit in quarantine still, we're thinking about the importance of recognizing the germs and the matches and the things that we're trying to stay away from. But the positive contrast is the positive things that we want to share and be able to see everybody and connect with everybody. Thank you so much for joining, and Mirza Hashem, we'll see you next week.